Make and receive offers. It's Ignite number 9. And our expectations today are that we're going to learn how to present offers when you represent a buyer. You're going to learn how to receive offers when you represent a seller. We're going to practice some scripts that you can use throughout the process, whether it's buyer or seller, and then learn how to set the stage for a successful negotiation. So, we're going to try to spend the majority of the time in activities in the class so that you don't have to just hear me drone on and on. Anybody have any trouble with the mission? Did everybody do their mission from the last session? Okay. Are there any ahas that you had from doing that mission work? Anything you learned specifically? No? Yes? Didn't do it?
Yeah. Just basically what we've been covering.
Okay.
Stuff we've been doing.
Just reviewing.
Just learning throughout.
Yes.
Content.
Okay. But did everybody bring a contact list, people to contact this time? Excellent. Well, as part of getting in the habit of contacting people, that we spend first part of our Ignite time contacting people. So if we'll go ahead and get our lists out, we can, before we do that, I just want an opportunity for everybody to report out what they did since the last session. Nicole.
Yes.
Contacts added to your database.
Well, I've exhausted my entire contact list in my phone, so now I'm having to, I was listening to them about doing the phone book, so I'm probably going to end up doing something very similar to that. I have an aunt who can sell water to a well, so she is going to help me, and she is really big in her church, so she asked me to, create a flyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to create a flyer and give to her to give to the people in her church.
Okay.
And she and I also talked about like a meet and greet type thing that she'll do. She'll kind of set up for me. I'll go and kind of do a presentation and say, "Hey, I'm new to the market," and then we learn not to say that we're new, but that I'm a seller now, and kind of do that. So that's kind of what I'm working on at this point.
Okay. Very good. And a couple of you mentioned phone books. When I first got into business, I grew up in High Point, and I know a lot of people in High Point, but I didn't have any kind of database. So what I did was I did go through the phone book, but rather than call each person in the phone book, I used that as a trigger to say, Adams. Oh yeah, I know Tom Adams, or I know Ben Adams. And then I just started making a list that way of names and phone numbers. And sometimes just going through all those names in the phone book triggers somebody else you might know by that name, even if they're not in the phone book. So that's another way of helping stimulate your brain. The other way is a technique that we learned in Mold called going through the yellow pages. You may start with the A's in the yellow pages, and you come across accountants. You say, "Oh yeah, I have an accountant," or "I know an accountant," and that may stimulate somebody that's not in your phone. They may not be a close acquaintance that would be in your phone, but that might stimulate those thoughts. And then same way with just going through each letter and making a list of those people. All right. Let's see. Reagan, how you doing on your 10 connections?
I'm a little slow this week.
Okay.
I've got company in town and lots of stuff going on. But
Okay.
I'm doing a few a day.
Excellent. All right. Notes? Carmen?
Well, I had a follow-up on a lady that got her to an appointment. Haven't been able to do that yet. And then I have a lady that does wants to meet with me over an unusual property that she has. And I've been having some problems getting her. It's in Rowan County, and the deed is in the vault, so I have to go over to get it myself. I won't can pull it up for me.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Well,
I've had to seek out people to come and give me advice and help me on that situation.
sign in sheet. Oh, I'm sorry.
And I did, I had to clear a couple of notes.
Excellent. Anybody else want to report their numbers?
I made 58 people last night.
You called 58 people last night?
No, I went to downtown Greensboro. There was an event down there.
Event in the park?
Mm-hmm.
Did you about that?
I had a good
The
couple
beach
of
music, Timbers thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was $10 to get in, and I went in there, and they had multiple vendors all set up, and I talked to all the vendors and got their information, and then talked to a couple of people that were there, and I knew the guys in the band, so I got all the guys in the band members, stuff like that.
We had a retirement meeting for old people last night at the library.
That's the best people that got money.
Remember Robbie, the girl that came to talk to us from this company?
210.
Oh, yeah. She was there.
She's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
She
Everywhere I
was-
go,
she-
she's there.
No, she came to the meeting as a participant in the meeting, not as a speaker.
Everywhere I go, I see that lady. See her at the
So
grocery store.
you were at the fun party. I would have loved to have been there. We were at the business party learning how to retire.
Sorry, Mama.
Not there.
Wish I could retire.
Yeah, but we're not there.
Well, you can come up with a plan. And this is one career that you have no limit as to what money you can make. So, as long as you're willing to work at it and develop the skills, and that's why you're here. All right. Well, congratulations to all of you guys for doing your homework and staying in tune with that, because that's what it's going to take to be successful. And not to pick on Reagan, but one of the phrases in bold is you can have reasons or results, and you can't have both. So this week she had reasons. Next week she'll have results, right? Okay. All right, so we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to make our calls. Everybody brought their list of people to contact today, so we're going to practice getting on the phone, being comfortable with talking to people. So. I'm going to pause this for a moment while we do that.
I'm 27.
You're not on the commercials anymore. But anyway,
I changed careers.
gotcha.
I'm selling real estate now, but I'm selling.
I hear you. Okay, so we're going to talk about offers. Making offers, receiving offers. All right. So this is where you've gotten to the point where you're not getting business. You're not in the process of getting business. You're dealing with the business. So if you've been working with a buyer, your search is now paid off, and you found the house that they want to buy. You've been working with a seller, finally got somebody interested in that house, and you're ready to get it sold. So this is the first time that the buyer and the seller are coming together, and obviously it's a highly emotional time when people are what are some of the emotions people have when they're buying a house or selling a house?
Fear.
Fear. What else?
Don't want to get rid of their old home place and attach to it. They don't want somebody else to come in and change it all around.
They're emotionally attached to the home that their kids grew up in or whatever. Exactly. And so your goal is to bring both of the parties together and create a situation that's going to be a win for everybody. So, that's that one. So we're getting, you've probably seen this before. So all these calls that you're making, you're getting some leads. And you're going to make more calls to get this many leads. Out of out of this many leads, you're going to get this many appointments. Out of this many appointments, you're going to get some that are going to list with you or agree to be a buyer's agent. So you get agreements. And now we're down to this point where we're actually going to write a contract. And we're almost to where you get paid. I remember when I first started in real estate and I was so excited to get my first listing. I was like, yes. And I was like, I didn't get paid. And then I got an offer on the listing, and we got a contract, and I still didn't get paid. But there's that excitement at each level, and gradually you are getting closer to a payday.
Why did you not get paid?
Because it hadn't closed yet.
Oh, okay. But you got paid.
And finally it closes,
Okay.
and you say, I still didn't get paid. Then it goes to get reported, and then you go pick up your paycheck.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
I was thinking, is there something we haven't figured out yet? Is there still that hurdle that we don't know about yet?
There's a lot of hurdles.
That's what we're after, is to finally get paid, to help people along the way and ultimately get paid. So when we make an offer, it's going to be a process, and it's not always a linear process. Sometimes it can be a loop. So this is where your knowledge and negotiating skills come into play, and also your patience, because it does take a great deal of patience. And your buyers and sellers are looking to you to guide them through the process. So there's some good information in here about taking control of that situation and guiding them to the process. One of the things I like to point out is we're not in the business to make decisions for our clients. It's their decision. That's which house they're going to buy, how much they're going to pay, how much they're going to accept. Our job is to advise. We're going to present them with the options and let them make the choice. There are ways to present the options that help them make the right choice, and I think that's the key to being successful, is knowing what to say and how to say it to get people to do what they need to do anyway. But when somebody asks you, well, would you take that offer? Or how much would you offer? I think that you're setting yourself up for a potential hazard, because you tell them too little and they don't get the house that they want, or you tell them too much and they feel like they overpaid. You're going to lose either way. So my recommendation is to present the facts and let them choose. And we'll go over that a little bit more in detail. So there's 3 ways that a seller will respond to an offer. Who can tell me one way?
Yes.
Yes, they'll accept the offer. And that's what we're hoping for as the buyer's agent, that they accept our offer. What's the second choice? No, we're going to reject the offer. And so if they accept the offer, we got a done deal. We sign the contract, we move on. If they reject it, then what?
Hopefully the counter.
Yeah, that's the third option, is the counter offer. And if they do say no as a buyer's agent, sometimes you need to ask, does no really mean no? Or does it just mean they didn't like this offer? What can we do to make it work? So one of the big advantages to people having an agent, I heard you talking about for sale by owners, and we talked about a little bit about the emotion of somebody selling their home and being attached to that home that they grew up in or whatever. One of the advantages of people having an agent is to take the emotion out of the equation. So it's our job to remain calm through this process and not get all caught up in it. We're tempering the emotions on this side and the emotions on this side, and we are working with the other agent to make it come together. We want everybody to win. We want the seller to sell. We want the buyer to buy, and we're massaging the deal to make it happen. So don't get caught up in the emotion yourself. You need to remain calm in the whole process. So the first thing we're going to talk about is when you're representing the buyer. there's three things we're going to do. We're going to prepare the offer, we're going to write the offer, and we're going to present the offer. I'm on page 12 if you're following along in your book. The checklist on page 13 is one you want to highlight. And I think it's also it may be in the back of the section under tools, but it's something that you may want to keep handy as you're doing your first offers, just to remember what it is that you do. Now, whether you represent the buyer or the seller, set expectations conservatively, and that way you reduce the chance of disappointment. I think that's very, very key. Your client is looking to you as a trusted advisor. So the more information you can give them about what's going to happen next, the better informed they're going to be and the better decisions they're going to make. So, and you're setting things up, you're setting the expectations. For instance, if they're going to make an offer and they want to make a low offer, we're going to kind of go over some scripts for that. So you might say, if you choose to make a low offer, this is what could happen. So set those expectations. You can say, we're right now in certain areas of the triad, we're in a very hot market. You can expect that at this price that the seller's asking, we may be in a multiple offer situation. So if you can let them know that on the front end, then they may be less likely to want to make a low ball offer.
Marshall, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so it says to obtain the buyer's pre-approval, and you can provide this with the client's offer at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time since I bought my house, but don't the pre-approval letters indicate the amount that they're pre-approved for?
Okay, that's a good question. Nicole is on page 13, the first item there, obtain buyer pre-approval letter from the lender. It depends on the lender. Some lenders write it different ways. They can write, this buyer has sufficient funds to qualify for purchase of the house at X, at this address.
Oh, okay. The reason why I was asking is because if they put the amount in there and say that someone's pre-approved for $300,000 and they find a house and they put in an offer for $250, but the house is listed at, $260, $265.
Mm-hmm.
If you submit that to the seller, in my opinion, it seems as though they would be like, well, they pre-approved for more. Why wouldn't they just give us, you know what I'm saying? It gives them.
Well, and it works the other way too. If the house is listed for $200 and their pre-approval letter says $175 and they're offering $175, then the listing agent begins to question, well, can they go up a penny higher?
Okay.
So I have some lenders that'll write it for the exact amount of the offer.
Okay.
And then it's up to you as the agent to say,
Okay.
They are approved for more.
Okay.
Or I don't know that I'd play that card on the front end, but
Right.
they may ask you that.
Okay.
And then and if necessary, you'd have to get a new letter.
This is actually a situation, it's not a question, but I just wondered how often this happened. My parents bought a year ago, and they, the first house that they were interested in, they did offer below what they were asking. Well, the sellers wouldn't let, I don't know if they got mad, if they were offended, but they would not let them put in a counter offer after that because they really wanted the house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the agent told them when they put that initial offer.
Yeah, and that's part of setting the expectations. And there's a script over here that we're going to go over shortly, but it talks about that there's some options. When you make this low offer, the seller may reject your offer or come back at full price just to send a message that they don't, and sometimes they get offended. So you as the buyer's agent, you may need to let your buyer know that by making that low offer, you run the risk of offending that seller to the point that they don't even want to deal with you.
So at that point, as you as the buyer's agent, and knowing that's the low offer, would you talk to that seller agent before putting that offer in just to see how willing they are to?
I get that a lot. If there are times when a buyer agent knows that it's a really low offer, and they don't even want to bother writing it up, and so they'll call me and they say, "Look, here's what they want to offer. So I need to even bother writing it up."
Okay, so that will. I mean, you can just talk with that agent just to see
Sure.
if this is going to be.
You can see what, and you know, some sellers are more motivated than others,
Right.
and some price it right. Smart ones price it right to get it sold at or close to the purchase, the listing price. Others want to bump it up and negotiate down, which is not what we normally recommend. But some of them insist on it. Okay, so on page 13, briefly go over this checklist. Have you already done the class on comparative market analysis?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. There's a whole class on preparing comparative market analysis, and I think there's probably as many ways of doing a CMA as there are agents out there. Each one has their own little peculiar ways they go about doing their own CMA. But I think it's important to educate the client as to what other things are selling for in the market. And let me tell you, not all agents get the education that you do. And there are agents out there they don't know what the heck they're doing. And they have a buyer, and they say, "Well, what do you want to offer?" "I don't know. What do you think of?" "I don't know. Whatever you want to offer." I mean, they don't give them any information. Now, that's not the majority, but there are some out there that are like that. So I think as good agents, you owe it to your buyer and to your seller to provide that information. We're talking about buyers right now. Provide them with the information of what other things have sold for in the area. That also helps you set those expectations for what they might be able to get the house for. And obviously, most listing agents are going to do the same thing when they're listing the house to come up with their list price. I have run into agents who go into a listing appointment and say, "Well, what do you want to list it for?" "Oh, I want to list it for $300. Okay. And they don't do it. I mean, they may or may not do their homework. So that's another story. So anyway, one of the things that you want to do is, after you've done that, is you want to make sure you can review the tax records. Are y'all familiar with Realist? Realist is a handy little tool. It's a link on the MLS. You can easily look on there and see what the tax value is. You can see what they paid for it. I think sometimes that's irrelevant, but I mean, if they paid $150 and they've owned it for 30 years, you probably figure they may not owe much on it anymore. The market may have changed considerably, so what they paid for it may not be relevant. And they may have bought it as foreclosure and put $100,000 in it too. You just don't know. So I think what it does tell you is if they bought it 2 years ago at a certain price, prices probably haven't changed much since then. And if they are asking significantly more than they paid for it, then it prompts another question of, well, what have they done to improve the value since they bought it? Did they do a big addition or a lot of upgrades or whatever? So, and sometimes you can go back and look and see what the listing was before when they bought it. If it's a recent enough listing, you can sometimes tell from the pictures if it had green shag carpet and lots of wallpaper and dated look that they've updated. Okay, so anyway, you want to go ahead and call the agent. When you're ready to make an offer, call them. I mean, before you even go to all the trouble to do the market analysis, call them, make sure the property is still available. especially in today's market where things are selling a little more quickly. You spend a lot of time doing all that stuff and then find out, oh shoot, it's not available. But go ahead and call them and say, my client's interested. We're going to be bringing you an offer. Do you have any other offers? Try to gather as much information as you can about the seller. But at least if they know there's an offer coming, if they already have an offer, then maybe they'll wait and get your offer too, or at least hold off in responding to another offer until they get yours. But anyway, when you call the other agent, it's a great opportunity to build rapport with that other agent. I think that is key to being a successful agent, is the rapport that you have with other agents. So many times in our real estate classes, our pre-licensing classes, they're so emphatic about you are the principal for your client. You are representing that buyer, or you're representing that seller. And yes, that is definitely true. But you're also most likely going to have to work with all those other agents again someday. So don't be a jerk. Build rapport. And I've dealt with some agents, and I've been one of those agents in the past, and I learned my lesson. You want to protect your client, but you don't have to do that at the expense of the relationship with the other agent. Yes.
And you'd also be surprised what other information you'll find out that's not listed in MLS.
Exactly.
You know, so even if you just went through showing time, because I've realized now that there'll be a property active at MLS, I'll go through showing time, I'll make the appointment, and then I'll get a phone call from the 1-800 number at showing time, canceling it, saying it's under contract, but they just haven't updated MLS yet. Mm-hmm. So now I call the agent directly, and I'm just like, I just want to make sure it's actually active. And then they'll sing like a canary, like, yes, let me, help me sell this house. It has this, this, and this, and this. And they'll just put so much more information towards you that you weren't reading, you didn't have access to, in their comments section. So you'll want to lot more, and they'll actually tell you, why they're selling. You don't even have to speak, and they'll just ramble.
Yeah, it depends on the agent, and some play their cards a little closer to their vest than others, but I think it doesn't hurt to ask, why are they selling? How soon do they have to be there? Whatever it might be. Just, some people just can't help themselves for answering a direct question.
Right.
Even though, and they may very well have permission from their client to tell you those things. But as agents, we're not supposed to divulge those things unless we have permission from our client. But I've learned that, like you said, it doesn't hurt to ask, but you would be amazed at how much you can find out. That was the next thing on our list. Ask questions. What's important to the buyer? Time frame for moving, motivation. This allows you to customize the offer. And that's important too. I mean, if it may be that selling it quickly and closing quickly is more important than the price to them. Or maybe they don't have a place to go and they'd rather have a 90-day close, and they'd rather accept a lower offer and have a 90-day close. So you just don't know unless you ask. Inquire about the activity on the property. I mean, have you had many showings? That's kind of important to know. If it's been on the market for 3 months and you've only had a handful of showings, and you kind of know better how to approach it in writing the offer. Obtain the seller's disclosure statement. Most agents, do y'all know where to find that? Anybody not know where to find the seller's disclosure statement?
In the little papers.
There's an icon. Most agents will upload them to the MLS now. That's pretty standard practice. For a long, long time, that did not happen. So anytime you were ready to make an offer, it was customary to call the listing agent and say, can you please send me property disclosures? And there may still be times that you have to do that. If it's not in the MLS, just call the agent and say, can you please send me the property disclosures, we want to make an offer. And find out if there have been other offers. You know, it may say something about the seller if they've had 4 offers that they've turned down already. Just don't know. All right, so the next thing you're going to do is write the offer. All right, so you're going to ensure that the buyer has all the checks. It's easier to go ahead and get the checks from them when you're writing the offer. If you're in person, go ahead and get the checks. You're going to hold those checks until the offer is accepted. There is a block on the offer to purchase and contract that says earnest money is received with this offer or within 5 days of this offer. I always check within 5 days of this offer, because that way most offers are presented online, so technically you're not giving them the earnest money check when the offer is presented. So sometimes it's easier to go ahead and get those checks at the time that you're writing the offer, if indeed you're doing it in person. This suggests that you have your laptop with you and do it in .loop in front of the client. Many clients are old school. Many agents are old school. Sometimes it's easier to print it out and go over the offer with them. When a buyer makes an offer, they're essentially selling themselves to the homeowner. So a cover letter makes your client's offer stand out and serves father purpose. It summarizes the offer and it humanizes the offer. I've had offers received and offers submitted that have had cover letters. Some in situations where you know it's going to be a multiple offer. One example that they used to give in this book was about an older couple that was selling their brick ranch one-level home, and they'd lived there for 40 years, and they had multiple offers on the property, and one of the offers had a cover letter with it. And in the cover letter, the the buyer talked about their handicapped child who needed a one-level home, and that the house was close to the school that they went to. And they ended up getting the offer, even though it was not the highest offer, because this older couple didn't know anything on the house. They were getting way more than what they paid for it 40 years ago, and they wanted to help this family out. So I had a situation last year where it was an estate situation. All the owners had no emotional attachment to it. It belonged to their aunt, and the house needed a ton of work, and none of them wanted to put any work in it. And rather than selling it to somebody who was going to buy it and flip it, they sold it to a young couple with a young family, and they had written a letter with it saying, you know, we love this house, we want to bring it back to its original glory, and we'd love to raise our children here. And they got a steal on the house. The house was probably worth $180, and I think they got it for $130, because these people wanted it sold fast. They liked the idea of a family getting in there, and they just wanted to be done. So you never know.
I worked for the team. This was back in the hot market in California. They had a cover letter with, there was always multiple offers, and they always had a cover letter to personalize the buyer when they presented their offers.
Okay. I mean, it's a great tool.
And it works really well.
Now, you can either have the client write the letter, or you can write the letter. But if you write the letter, you need to make sure that you're not divulging any information that you don't have permission to divulge about the buyer that could compromise their ability to negotiate. So, you're going to create a loop, write up the offer. If they're out of town, you can do it online. You can pull it up online. You can give them the information, go over it with them over the phone. Page 15 is a checklist for writing the offer. How's everybody doing? Does anybody need a break? Good? Okay. All right. So these are the key things that we're going to deal with when you're ready to write the offer. You've prepared the CMA, and you're going to go over the CMA with the buyer and determine what price they want to offer and how soon they're going to close, and if they're going to ask for any closing costs. The seller's disclosure, obviously you're going to pull those up and go over them in case there's any red flags or any deal breakers that are on the disclosure statements. Conveyances, that's talking about what stays with the house and what goes. So, obviously fixtures are things that are attached to the property, right? So, there is a spot in the MLS that will list anything that is attached to the property that the seller is not going to be leaving. Sometimes there might be a family heirloom chandelier or the brackets for the television or things like that. So go ahead and pay attention to that in the MLS to make sure that you include that in the offer that it does not convey. And likewise, if you're on the other side receiving the offer, make sure you check that it's in there. If your seller's not planning on leaving it, it better well be in the contract, even though it's in the MLS. If it's not in the contract, they could end up leaving something that they meant to take. So you may end up buying a new refrigerator or something. As far as other things that stay, obviously the personal property belongs to the seller. There are times when the refrigerator may match the rest of the kitchen, and they want to ask to include the refrigerator. In general, lenders do not allow you to put anything more than maybe a refrigerator, washer, and dryer in with the offer. If you say buy the whole house furnished, that's not going to fly if they're getting a loan. If it's a cash deal, it would be fine. But lenders don't want to confuse the difference between the value of the real property and the value of the personal property. So they're going to make you take it out if you write that into the offer.
Make that a separate
You can make it a separate
contract.
Separate. I find that the best way to do that is to say, let's don't worry about the personal property at this point. Let's worry about the house. If you decide you want to negotiate with the seller on some of the personal property, then let's do that outside the contract. You can deal with them directly because I don't want to be involved in that. I don't sell personal property. I sell real estate. I think that's the easiest way to deal with it. Because it can get sticky because it's like trying to describe each thing and list it. Okay, earnest money. When the buyer makes a deposit to the seller, they're going to show good faith as to what they are that they are interested in. My general rule of thumb is earnest money needs to be enough that it's going to hurt a little bit if they back out. I mean, that's what I tell my sellers. I mean, if their house is a $500,000 house and somebody wants to put down $1,000 earnest money, the person that can afford a $500,000 house could easily walk away from $1,000. Most likely. So yeah, I think it needs to be enough that it's going to send the message from the buyer's perspective to send the message, yes, I'm serious about buying this house. From the seller's perspective, that if that person were to change their mind on the day before closing, that they don't have to think twice about it. So, and we talk about this more in the, at least I do, in the class where we talk about filling out the offered purchase and contract form, about how much should earnest money be and how much should due diligence fee be. The earnest money is going to go towards their down payment anyway, and if they choose to change their mind during the due diligence period, they're going to get that money back. So sometimes, if you're representing the buyer, maybe you put in a higher amount of earnest money that indicates to them, yes, I'm serious about buying your house. So it's all about sending a message. Generally speaking, in this market, it's probably 1 to 2% of the selling price. Sometimes some buyers agents feel like they're doing their best by making it as low as possible for their buyer, that they have as little money tied up into it as possible. That's not always in the buyer's best interest, because if they really love that house, if they want to send the message that they really want to buy it, then they might want to put in a little more earnest money. Time for seller acceptance. Now, on our contracts, in order to put a time limit for seller acceptance, we use the additional provisions addendum. It has a slot on there that says we expect an offer by this date and this time. There are agents that are using that now because with the market being a little bit stronger, they don't want a seller holding on to their offer for 2 or 3 days while they wait for other offers to come in. They want to go ahead and get a response. I think it can work both ways. That some sellers might look at it as, well, I'm not ready to make that decision. But typically, most sellers will respond as quickly as they can, and you can sometimes do that verbally without having to put it in writing. The other time that it makes really good sense to use a additional provisions addendum for the time limit on the offer is if you're working with a buyer who may be here from out of town and they're just here for the weekend, and they need to make a decision, and they've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 homes, and they make an offer on the first home, they may want to know whether that's going to be accepted before they leave town, so that they can, if it's not going to be accepted, that they can move to their second choice. The other aspect of the writing the offer is financing terms. Now, don't hesitate to call the buyer's lender. I mean, I would already be in conversation with that lender from day one before you even put them in the car. You want to make sure that that buyer has been pre-approved. You want to know what kind of loan they're getting. You need to know all that so that when you're ready to write the offer, you know. And the other thing you want to know from that lender is how long should it take for you to process this loan. And I ran into a situation just a few weeks ago where the buyer was getting a down payment assistance from the city of High Point. And we had 45 days. We had allowed 45 days to close. The city of High Point's department that processes that would not do anything until the full loan approval was done. So it took close to 40 days. Well, they switched loan types in between, so it took a little longer. It took almost the 45 days to get the full disclosure, the full loan approval. Then it got submitted to City of High Point. They had to approve it. They said, it takes us 5 to 7 days to approve. And then it had to go to the accounting department, who only cuts checks 1 day a week. And they'd already missed the deadline for that. So it was another week before they could cut the check for the down payment. So it took 2 more weeks. But if you know what kind of loan and you're dealing, that's why it's important to deal with lenders that you know can get the job done, communicate well, and they've done have enough experience that they know about these pitfalls and can explain it to you at a time. So I was representing the seller on that, so that's my first experience with the City of High Point loan. So anyway, know the type of loan, know what can happen so that you can prepare the offer such that you have sufficient time to make sure that you get it all done. Which is basically what the last one says, allow ample time for the loan to be finalized. Closing date. I like what this says. It says Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are the best days to close because they're in the middle of the week and you have an extra day before or after if needed to complete the transaction. Who knows when a house is officially closed? When it's recorded. If you have a closing at 3:30 on Friday afternoon,
It's not sold till Monday.
there's a strong potential it might not be sold till Monday. They've got to wait for the funding letter, and they don't get the funding letter until after it's too late to record. So you don't want your buyers thinking they're moving in over the weekend, and they've got all their stuff sitting on the truck, and then suddenly, oh, sorry, can't move into Monday. So I have a real problem with Friday closings because of that. Next thing is home warranty. Review any home warranty considerations. It might be a good idea when you're talking to the selling agent to find out if they already have a warranty when they listed the home, and if so, what company, and that way you can, and how much it is. That way you can write that into the offer. Repair limits. That's not something that we deal with much in this market. I never see that. But it's not to say I haven't seen it. You may have a seller who says, "Oh, I'm not fixing anything," or you may have a buyer who says, "Well, I'm willing to take on a lot of the small stuff." So you could write in something that says, "Buyer agrees to pay for all repairs up to $1,000," or you may need to get an attorney to word it correctly for you. But that can sometimes be appealing to a seller, that they're not going to get nitpicked on a lot of little tiny repairs. Special clauses and contingencies. That's not really applicable for us because we have the due diligence period. They can back out for any reason or no reason at all. I'm not sure what exactly that would be referring to, but there could be special circumstances that you would need to include. Okay, let's move along. If anybody does need to take a break, feel free to get up and do what you need to do. But I'm going to move on through so that we make sure we cover everything. All right, so we're on page 17. I want everybody to turn to page 17, and I want you guys to match up into groups of 2 or 3 if there's, we got an odd number, I believe. So, Bo and Wendy, you 2, and you 3 in the group. And so on page 17, we're going to practice overcoming objections, or overcoming the obstacles to writing an offer. So we got a situation on the first one where the buyer wants the seller to make repairs. So you take a turn reading through that. I know it's going to sound redundant because you're going to hear it so many times, but I think hearing it over and over and saying it yourself helps emphasize in your own mind, so that when you're faced with that situation, you're more likely to remember what to say. So let's do that now. Let's start with the first script. Everybody pick somebody in your group to do the first script, and then trade off, and then go to the second script.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna make Excel spreadsheet out of it.
Can I have your John?
So the sales spreadsheets are new.
Thank you, sir.
I use
What were you saying on your side?
I have no idea.
I was gonna say, are you a real?
I don't even know.
Just track them, and I literally track them, hour by hour using Excel spreadsheets. So I mean, the inventory, I know exactly what's happening, what's on the table, I can call that instantly if something's wrong. Count on the phone. Every time you talk to someone, it's just someone who puts somebody, they would hit it on the phone and go, count, so hour by hour, exactly. Myself.
Well, that was when I first started and I knew nothing.
And you can tell everybody's not good friends. Tell me, what's that? And they just can't see out it's okay.
Next week they have that ballet class. And then those are the from the.
So I have to
What?
Didn't Caleb come up with until the 1 o'clock? 1:30. Scarlett told us they canceled
I think they'll try to do something because they know we already, I've had it one time. And it's good, but I miss a lot of color. Yeah, I haven't had it, I did the 1 hour on.
Sean was doing
online. Let's go.
watching them, so now
Oh,
I'm check out the sessions.
And there was some email that came out with
That's what
the
I'm
wasn't
doing.
free. So she called me for the big job and stuff, helped me and set it up. And I feel everything. She was really good. She want me in there, so.
Anybody want a copy of this contract?
No, because there's new ones, so I'm gonna wait for the new one. Thank you.
We did 5. Yeah, she was sent something. There's so many things there. 30, 60, 90 class. So Monday we've got a class on Monday. For the AI class. So I don't know what that is. I don't know what KPA now that is. It's in Canada. I'm not doing that. I have a phone about that. Did you see that it's scheduled on that class? Which one? This business plan? Monday. That was the other, that's the one I had seen. Is that a coaching one? It is. Okay, because somebody else will be doing business plan.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, is that supposed to sit down and do it, or is that supposed to like that? I don't know if she's going to do this. Have you looked at it?